Trump tariffs are a disaster, no matter how you slice it. It undisputably not only hurts the American economy, but isolates the US on an international stage. This isolation has become even more obvious as over the weekend many countries have either temporarily halted or completely stopped sending different type of mails to the US. Let's take a look.
In Austria joined a growing list of countries today that have suspended postal shipments to the United States over its import tariffs. Over the weekend, several other nations, including Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Italy, all stopped shipping nearly all of its merchandise to the United States. The United Kingdom, for its part, says it will follow suit on Tuesday. This comes as an exemption that allows packages costing less than $800 to come into the U.S. duty-free, and it's set to expire on Friday. Now, letters, gifts, and small packages worth less than $100, they will still remain exempt. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent. Jolene, thanks so much for being with us here. Over the last decade, the number of low-value parcels entering the country, they climbed to nearly $1.4 billion. So why are these countries suspending most of their shipments now to the U.S.?
Yeah, so it's 1 point something billion, the number of packages coming in under de minimis, right? And then 60% actually are coming from China. So when you look at what's happening and why all of these countries are either pausing or stopping their shipments to the US, it's because there's a lot of confusion and lack of clarity, they say, on what they should do in terms of how to handle all of the new rules. And so this has been a rule, a loophole that's been in effect since 2016. It goes out of effect essentially on Friday. And DHL, the big shipper, the express shipper from Germany, really summed it up. And they basically say Deutsche Post and DHL Parcel Germany will temporarily suspend. You can still do DHL Express for those more expensive shipments. But I thought DHL really summed it up well. They said the key questions remain unresolved, particularly regarding how and by whom customs duties will be collected in the future. And DHL goes on to say how the data transmission to the U.S. CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, will be carried out. All of those are still big questions. That's why they're putting a pause. And they're just one country of so many that have now said, okay, we've got to suspend for a second and figure out what to do.
There could be massive ramifications from all of this. How will this affect manufacturers in those countries as well as buyers here in the U.S.? I can imagine a lot of people wondering what's going to happen to all my packages.
Yeah, especially if you're shopping, say, on Temu and other companies that are shipping from China, your stuff could very much be affected. It could either get more expensive or perhaps you can't get it if you're ordering from certain countries in Europe. But these companies, these manufacturers, the ones who are sending and depending on de minimis, under $800 packages, have been depending on this loophole for a long time. So you could see some of those manufacturers, at least in the short term, take a hit. But if you're ordering, you can expect to see perhaps more warnings, more changes as you hit that checkout page on a website or on an app as to how much something will really cost or if you can get it at all.
All right, Jolene Kent, thank you very much. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And while Trump is signing meaningless, not enforceable, no trade deals on the back of napkins and puts the National Guard on the streets to chase American citizens, a right he does not have, our Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is doing real government work. He is in Europe, forging real trade deals and military alliances with reliable partners. But before we dig deeper into Carney's possible achievements in Europe, let's take a look at the expectations of Carney's administrations at the beginning of this 4-day trip.
Agenda in Europe. Well, Jeff, Canada and the European Union these days, of course, are facing a common set of issues. First, dealing with the fallout from Donald Trump's global tariffs. And then, of course, there's the war in Ukraine. Prime Minister Mark Carney will spend a day each here in Poland, Germany, and Latvia starting on Monday. He'll be accompanied by Defense Minister David McGuinty. And the two will be visiting with Canadian Armed Forces personnel who are stationed in Poland and in Latvia. Both countries, of course, are playing key roles deterring Russian aggression and supporting Ukraine. Now, in his discussions with the leaders of all three countries, Carney will be looking for ways to help Ukraine achieve a ceasefire and defend a ceasefire. But leaders will also be looking at ways to improve their economies and diversify trading patterns, again, in response to Donald Trump's tariffs. Poland is Europe's fastest growing economy right now, and while he's here, Carney is expected to sign a strategic partnership on energy and security with his counterpart, Donald Tusk. In Germany on Tuesday, Carney will meet with business leaders who have a particular focus on critical minerals.
There's a broad range of areas from critical minerals to energy and defense and security where we are intensifying our discussions with Germany. Many opportunities.
Carney's trip in the next week builds on work that he started back in Kananaskis, Alberta, at the G7 summit, and then a couple of weeks after that at the Canada-EU summit in Brussels. Both of those were held in June. And government officials traveling with the Prime Minister are telling reporters that it is a high priority for the Carney government to bring Canada and Europe closer together, and that's what the next week will be all about.
After Mark Carney visited the Ukraine on Sunday to ensure his unwavering support for this war-torn country, he traveled to Poland to meet with Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, to build new trade and security alliances while our traditional ally south of the border has proven himself to be erratic, to say the least. And Carney's visit in Poland was quite successful. Besides re-establishing old trade agreements and creating new ones between Canada and Poland, Carney made sure that Canada will also be the lead nation at a very important defense expo in Poland next year. But see for yourself.
Sandy, the Prime Minister has arrived here in Berlin, the third country on this trip, and just like the other stops, he's talking trade and defense.
Maple leafs on your shoulders. They feel hope.
Prime Minister Mark Carney stressed to Canadian troops in Warsaw and European leaders, Canada is ready to spend big on defense.
We will quadruple our spending on defense between now and the end of the decade.
Not only promising to meet NATO's 2% of GDP spending target by this year, but the new target of 5% by 2030.
We have your backs. We're serious about this.
Carney bringing his defense minister along to many European meetings, including the trip to Ukraine, which marks a shift from the past.
I think what it indicates is that the landscape has changed. I think Canadians know that the landscape has changed, that the geopolitics are changing, that the threat landscape has changed.
David McGuinty says Canada's defense plan needs diversification.
We're not only making a diplomatic visit, but we're really interested in diversifying our alliances and our defense investments, and having Minister McGuinty there puts an exclamation point behind that.
Diversification. We've heard that word a lot from the Prime Minister about trade, too, given the trade war with the United States.
Poland needs reliable partners that are ready to cooperate closely in the nuclear energy sector, and also as regards RES, renewable energy sources.
Poland has the fastest growing economy in the EU, and the two leaders recommitted to an agreement signed last year, but now focusing on trade, energy, and defense.
Our trade relationship last year grew by something like 22% in a single year. So the appetite is really there. It also means that people are kind of knocking on our door more.
So one of the sort of victories, I suppose, or wins that Mark Carney would want to point to would be the invitation for Canada to be the lead nation at a fairly important European Defence Expo, which is the one that's held in the Polish city of Kielce every year. And next year, Canada will be the lead nation of about 60 national delegations that go there. So, of course, Canada has been trying to insert itself into European defense production agreements, into the sort of network of buying and selling of arms between European NATO members, partly for trade reasons, but also because Canada feels that not only have its trade relations with the United States been threatened, but also its sovereignty has been threatened by talk of annexation and so on. So there is just a general attempt here to pivot to Europe. That's a lot of what this trip is about. It's partly about Ukraine and Ukraine's needs in its war with Russia, but it's also about Canada's own attempts to draw closer to Europe both in terms of trade and in terms of defense. So that would be seen as a win here in Poland, and it's not really that surprising because the relationship between Poland and Canada has grown extremely close over the last decade. Poland has become increasingly important both within the European Union, where it is the fastest growing economy, and within NATO, where it's now the largest military in NATO after the United States and Turkey. In fact, Poland's military is almost 10 times the size of the military of Canada with a similar population. This is a country that spends almost 5% of its GDP on defense, making it one of the biggest spenders in NATO. And that is partly, well, it's almost really exclusively because of Poland's geographical location and history. So it's a country that Canada has got a lot of interests shared with, and it's also, of course, the country which Canada uses to train the Ukrainian army. Operation Unifier is here, and Mark Carney met with some of the Canadian soldiers who were involved in that training this morning.
Evan Dyer.
Next stop on Carney's list was Germany, where he met with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to establish new trade and security relationships. And at the end of the day, they got some important deals done. While the orange idiot in the White House tries to extort the world to get his greedy hands on critical minerals, Carney just signed such a deal with Germany. Yeah, Donny, that could have been you. But the fascist gangster is just not clever enough. And that is just fine with me.
They've got some deals done. First, Canada and Germany are going to have signed a critical minerals partnership that will see Canadian critical minerals produced and developed for export markets. Second, Canada and Germany say they're going to get serious about finding ways to export Canadian liquefied natural gas to German markets. Details TBD. But the big commercial and defense news of the day was all about submarines. The Royal Canadian Navy is in the market right now for 12 new subs. And Canada announced today that it has narrowed down the potential bidders or suppliers for those subs to two companies. One in South Korea, a Hanwha Ocean company, and the other a German-Norwegian consortium headed up by ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems. Canada is not buying nuclear submarines, but both the German-Norwegian consortium and the Koreans, they can build the type of submarine that can still stay submerged underwater for 21 days. You got to have that if you're going to operate under Arctic ice, using a combination of diesel and battery power. Canada's also asking both these manufacturers, you got to make sure you build these subs so that they can fire ballistic missiles. Now, Canada...
Yes, to purchase those submarines will cost Canada a chunk of money. But keep in mind that part of the written agreement, yes, Donny, a real agreement, will be that whoever gets the deal, Germany or South Korea, has to spend the same amount of money that Canada pays for the subs back into Canada in form of payments for purchased goods or services. I think it's fair to say that Carney's Europe trip has been a clear success so far. Today, before he flies home to Canada, he stops in Latvia, where Canadian troops help to ensure that no Russian army crosses the Russian-Latvia border, only 400 kilometers away. Please let me know in the comments below how you see Carney's trip to Europe. Are you happy with Carney's effort to make good on his election promises to establish better and more prosperous relationships with Europe? We read every thought and story you share. For more real news, facts and viewpoints to counterbalance the demagoguing of the right-wing media, please like and subscribe. It goes a long way to help the channel. Till next time, I'm Wilfried Lemkuller from Europe Curious.